welcome to the Hustle and Flow podcast.
A platform we use to explore varying perspectives and opinion through candid conversation.
We chat about philosophy, business, and all things life. I'm Shaun the Hustle.
And I'm Les the Flow.
Let's go.
All right, guys. Our guest today is a digital artist whose work is informed by a wealth of cultural references. From 80s aesthetics and 90s fashion to comic books and tattoo design, he renders his ideas in flashes of neon and monochrome. Creating captivating gifs, murals, and digital artwork, his arcane obsession with the occult seeps through every pore of his pieces, fusing Japanese anime with pop horror and searing, luminous colors. His work is clean and graphic in production, exploring humanity's depths and fractures and creating his own hyperreal, infernal paradise. He has worked with high-profile international clientele, including collaborations with Coca-Cola, Facebook, HBO, Microsoft, just to name a few. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guest to the show today, James Jirat Patradoon.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you here, James. And what we'd love to do is invite you to share your origin story with us first up. We'd love to, hear about your past, your history, what's been important to you leading up to all the way to today. So the floor is yours.
Well, I mean, with origin stories, right? It's like, how far back do you want to go? You know, there's like an origin story, then there's probably like a prequel and a prequel. I guess I'll start at the real beginning. I was born in Thailand and I moved to Australia when I was a year old with my family. And growing up, I was, I think what's really weird is like when I was growing up, like I was doing a lot of art stuff. And I think a lot of kids do a lot of art stuff the whole time they're growing up. But no one ever really tells you that you can actually make a living out of it or there's a job. I mean, it's pretty more obvious now, but like back when I was kind of growing up, it was always just like a hobby or like a thing that people just did. But you always knew that in the end, you'd always be something else, like a lawyer or an accountant or graphic designer, or in my case, like Asian family. So it'd be like a doctor or like an architect or something like that. And I don't think it was until what I found was like, as I saw like a lot of friends that I grew up with who also kind of drew all the time, like we'd always draw like comic book stuff. We were mad into comic books or like watching cartoons in the morning and stuff like that, drawing all that stuff. People kind of fell away, but I kind of just kept at it, which has more to do with me just kind of like being in my own world growing up the whole time. And when I finally finished high school, I went to art school. And I think that was probably the point that things really ticked over for me in terms of like, because my parents were like, you need to go to university for something. We're not going to let you not go. And so I chose, I went to COFA, College of Fine Arts, UNSW, which is called something else now. I was meant to do digital media, which was meant to be a more practical version of doing art. So you'd be able to do like graphic design, web design, animation, things like that. But I didn't get the marks to get in. So I did fine arts instead. And then I had the intention to transfer to digital media the entire time, but I kind of never got around to it. And then next thing I knew, I'd done like an honors thesis and finished fine arts, and it was finished and it was done. And from there, I think it was when I started taking art like really, really seriously. Because when you do honors, or when you do like third year in fine arts, like you're forced to kind of take things a lot more seriously. And I think the teachers don't really give you the time of day until you kind of run that gauntlet, if that makes sense. Like if you a lot of kids like go to art school in like first year or second year, and then they drop out and they do something else. And I think it was really cool that like, well, not cool. It'd be nicer if the teachers took you more seriously from the beginning, but I don't think that they would have really been able to do that. So you kind of like prove what's the word for it? It's like you prove your worth by just the longevity and the kind of work that you make. And so the way I started making work in like third year and like honors year is kind of pretty much to this day how I still make it. So it was really good for me. I know like a lot of people, I have a lot of other friends who are artists who like, came from completely different backgrounds. like law or like, web design or like fashion or something, and then they became artists. But for me, I found that kind of structure was kind of really necessary at the time, because I really had no idea what I was doing. And early in my career as well, like when I started like working and doing art for a living, I feel like I didn't really know what I was doing either. A lot of it was really like trial and error, and a lot of it was going along and just doing things that you thought you might be wanting to do, and then finding out that they're not, and then doing things that you didn't think you'd want to do, and then finding out that that was like something that like piqued your interest. And so I kind of just kept doing that for a really long time. And yeah, I just haven't stopped. I think that's kind of like the thing with art. It's like or doing any kind of creative career, it's kind of like you just I think it's marked by like how long you can like keep it up, because it's a messed up career, man. It's like it's really volatile, and it's really like scary, and like you kind of got to be a bit psycho to keep at it, so yeah, I don't know how long I've been doing it now. I think I officially probably started in about 2007, so a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, man, the first thing that I sort of think about when you tell that story, and there's a lot to talk about for sure, but like, a lot of your, the childhood that you described, I resonate with that a lot. Maybe it's because we're both Asian, maybe we're both like, into anime and grew up on that thing, and expressed ourselves, our love for that through art and drawing and things like this. But the thing that sort of caught my attention with, and I'd love like to delve down a little bit deeper, is the fact that you kept on it. Like you said, you got to sort of just be consistent with it, and you experience friends like dropping off with it, and you mentioned a few times along your journey that you really didn't particularly understand what it is that you like were doing, essentially, like in context of like a linear career per se, things like this. But like, what kept you on there, man? Because like, maybe it's this sense that you were in your own world a lot of the time, and for me, it feels like it's a very courageous sort of path to take, in that you're not influenced so much by the outside noise or pressures from any people around you, whether it's your parents or friends or otherwise. So I'd love to dive deeper down that, man.
It's yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's really some really kind words. Thank you. I think I've been thinking about this thing a lot lately. Do you know about the Dunning-Kruger effect?
No.
Have you heard about that? So the Dunning-Kruger effect is when it's like a graph. It's like when it's someone who recently, like people use it a lot to describe Trump supporters. So it's just like, you're too dumb to know how dumb you are, kind of thing. So it's just like you think you're smart, but you haven't broken through to a level where you realize how like dumb you are, basically. So I think it's kind of like this like naivety thing, and I think I've been thinking about that a lot, and in terms of like, yeah, how do I continue doing the stuff that I do? And a lot of stuff that I do has a lot, like I feel it ties back to that a lot. It's like my whole career is this kind of weird Dunning-Kruger effect, where I don't really think about things as far ahead as I think a lot of other people do. And so in my mind, I'm like, that's not going to be a problem at all. That's totally fine. I'll just like enter into stuff like a dog chasing a car, and then it just gets done. And then I move on to the next thing. And I think it's equal parts like being really stubborn, and also kind of like being a bit naive. And yeah, like I learned lessons along the way, and definitely there are points where I freak out, and I go like, oh my God, like how did I do this? How am I going to be able to actually land this or accomplish this? Like, who do I think I am? And I think a lot of artists go through, and a lot of creatives go through that kind of imposter syndrome as well. But I think the difference with me, and interestingly enough, like a lot of the other artists that I've spoken to who are still doing, still active and very successful, is that they don't overthink it. And I think there is, then I also have a bunch of friends who are also like massive perfectionists, and they overthink everything, and they know everything that can go wrong. They are kind of like what's the word for it, like terrified into like submission, and not, and just, you know, they can't start things. But the reason why I can start things is because I guess, and you know, and finish things is because I have like a track record of doing it, and two, yeah, I don't think, like, I think about the work a lot, and it's like my whole life, but I don't. It's kind of like the Silicon Valley kind of ethos of kind of like fail fast, you know, or like done is better than perfect. It's like you can improve later with iterations of what you do. So it's like not everything I do needs to be the most perfect thing. And I try to, but if it isn't, then it's not the end of the world. I'm not really embarrassed by it. Or I'm not really, don't let it like destroy me or anything like that. I kind of just want to move on to the next thing, you know, because I think the thing about an art career is, or, you know, like I said, like a creative career is like, it is like a long game. And I think when you, there was a point when I had like a massive breakdown about it like a couple of years ago. And then I started seeing it as like, dude, you're going to be doing this when you're like 50 and 60. And a lot of the artists that I really look up to, I thought they were dead. They're not dead. They're just old. They're still around. They just don't and they just make work every now and then, or they're just like still making work, but they're still doing it. You know, they're in their like 60s. And it isn't this kind of career that is like only for like young people. It's not like modeling or like music in some respect, where it's like you got to be like the young hot it thing now. Like with art, it's like you're the testament to how good your work is like it's a long game, and people like seeing the work progress, people like seeing the work evolve, and it's kind of just stuck with you for life, you know. And when you start seeing it that way, it takes a lot of pressure off as well. For instance, it's like I have, the way I work is like I have like a list of drawings to do. Like I don't really keep a sketchbook. I keep like a notepad file on like on like iCloud, and it's just like bullet points of just drawings that I got to do, and they're in like the hundreds, you know. So I don't really, like, I'm not worried about artist block. I'm worried about like not having the time to draw everything. But I know they're going to be done at some point. When they're going to be done, I don't know. But it's just like life just kind of gets in the way, or like commercial jobs get in the way, which isn't too bad. It's not a bad thing. But yeah, I just know that I'm going to be doing this like kind of forever, you know.
Yeah. And it's such a like interesting way to think, like in comparison to, I guess, general Western thinking, which is, you know, largely goal orientated, you know, as you know. And you know, this is something that I myself have been trying to, I guess, move away from over the last, you know, 7 or 8 years myself, just trying to, you know, ever since exiting the corporate world and doing something that is more passion driven, or just for myself essentially. And I call what I do art in my own way. You know, it is the expression of who I am, and it's such a different dynamic to live by. You know, and I want to sort of go back to something you said just surrounding perfectionism, because I think it would be a very interesting thing to talk about, just because my sense of it is, I guess your view on perfectionism would have changed, I guess, back when perhaps you weren't so established versus how you are now. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, and you know, whether that is something that is true, or whether it is something that, you know, you've thought about.
Yeah, I think the perfectionism thing is kind of hard because, you know, there are certain points where I do, like, I'll know when something's wrong. For instance, if I do a mural, it's funny because I did a exhibition at the beginning of the year with 4A Center for Contemporary Asian Art down at they had like a pop-up spot at World Square.
Oh, yeah,
and I remember, yeah, did you see it?
Yeah.
So I was doing the murals there, and you know, it got to a point where I was just kind of like, I'd spent so long painting them, and I was getting like friends to assist, and it was like I was so exhausted because I was painting for like, you know, like 15 hours a day, and then like going home and then coming straight back. And you know, I was getting towards like the opening, and I was just kind of like walking around and just seeing bits where I'm just like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. I need to fix this, I need to fix that. And I remember the curator is Con Jericaris. I was talking to him, and he's just like, I'm like, oh dude, do you think I need to fix that? And he's like, dude, no one sees the way is going to see what you see with that. You know what I mean? And I think it's always a sobering thing whenever you think about things from, because when you're making the stuff, you're kind of so up close to it, and you have there's so much to it. It's kind of like an iceberg, you know, like people see the tip of it, but there's so much more that goes into it, and there's so much more that you want to put into it that you maybe can't because of timing reasons or resources or whatever. And you just got to be like, dude, like, what, look, like take a step back and just be like, well, from what someone who hasn't seen this at all sees, it's like, it's still pretty good, you know? Like, and another thing I think for me is that whenever I do make certain work, I really am in tune to, you know, like, especially working digitally, because the thing is with working digitally, you can do iterations and stuff forever. Like, it's not like a painting where it's like, this is dry, okay, I'm worried about like ruining it, or like, you know, it's already been glazed, or this is on the wall, or blah blah blah. Like with digital, you can literally just like keep reworking stuff, and I've done that in the past as well. But I'm like a lot more in tune with like, cool, is this pretty much saying what it needs to say? Can I take a step back from it, because there's so much other stuff I got to be doing, you know? And I think the difference between now and working when I first started, I think I was maybe, there's irony. It's like, I look at the work that I made when I first started, and I was like, that there's so much wrong with that. But I knew I was probably a bit more of a perfectionist back then than I am now. Whereas now it's just like a lot more efficient. And I think that, you know, that just comes with like learning how to see your own work, and learning how to see other people's work, and learning how to see what you like or don't like out of something. And also working in like commercial illustration has been really interesting, because I will have something done to, not that I don't half-ass anything, like I'll have something done to like what I think is like the peak of my ability, and I'm just like trying to, you know, second guessing myself and trying to think like, okay, what might the client say? And then the client will just say something completely random that's wrong with it, and you kind of go like, oh, I do, like, that's not wrong, but I can see how you think that's wrong. But then it's funny to, because it's kind of like you have your own way of looking at your own work, and other people have different ways of looking at their work. And I think, yeah, I think if they're looking for errors and looking for what's wrong, as opposed to looking at it from zoomed out and kind of just go like, okay, it does this, so like, do what you want it to do. I think that's kind of the biggest difference. And the perfectionist thing, it's like affects everyone. And it's like, I think I would rather have, it's kind of like, there's this analogy for that I heard once, where it's like, there's a pottery teacher, and he splits his class into two, and half the class has 1 year to work on one pot, and the other class has like the entire year to just like make like 100 pots or something. And it's kind of like this weird analogy of kind of like, okay, who and which side of the class is going to actually become better at their work? The one that kind of like was like fiddling around with it for like a whole year and trying to create this masterpiece thing, or the ones that just kind of kept just making it and like proceeding and like making one after the other. And you know, the end of the story is kind of like, well, it can kind of be both, but it's mostly sways towards the end of like, yeah, if you just do more, you learn more. And I think if I don't, like, there are artists that draw a lot faster than me, and there's artists that make work a lot faster than me. But yeah, I think to get over the perfectionism, I kind of have to think about like, oh dude, do you really want to be spending this long on this one image? Because especially now, it's like in an era of like social media and Instagram, you don't really have the luxury, like, as much as it sucks, like, to kind of like fit within the algorithm or whatever it is we live in right now. It's like, I could spend like a month on like a drawing if I wanted to, but then that's, what, I can split that up into like 6 content posts over a month. That's like not enough really, so it's just like I'm a lot more in tune with like, okay, what's going to work in from that perspective, and what's going to work in terms of like what's going to satisfy me. And I think in 2019 I spent like an entire year on an exhibition, and that ended up being like in LA at Super Chief Gallery, and that was really good, but that was only about 10 artworks, and I'm like, damn, you spend like a year doing like 10 artworks. That's like not like, they were great, like I was really happy with them, and it was all really good, but like there's a part of me, I guess, that's always just like, dude, that's like not enough. And so then I think into 2020 when COVID hit, and I was kind of just like, I was back in Australia, I was just like, at my parents' house and just on a laptop and just like freaking out. I was just like drawing rapidly, like just making heaps and heaps and heaps of stuff, just to like this kind of weird feeling of just like being productive and making work is kind of like, what's the word for it? It's kind of like, that's what you have to do to be able to be alive. It's kind of messed up, but that's kind of like where I'm at with a lot of the time. Like if I'm not making stuff, if I'm not doing stuff, then I'm just kind of like, well, what's the point? Like there obviously there is more of a point to life than working. But yeah, so right now my headspace is in like, I'd rather just be making more and more stuff, and which has been good, but it's just like, it's also kind of like there's never enough,
Exactly. I think that's a big piece there. I mean, enough to who, right? And enough for when, and all these sorts of questions popped up, and like it's just something that's quite humorous and paradoxical in a way, but it's kind of messed up at the same time, because it will sort of play on your mind for
and I think you
mentioned
something. Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting before about the goal-oriented side of the creative thing, because essentially if you're creative and you're like doing art and this is going to be you forever, and the timelines are kind of endless until you die, then at which point, how do you kind of like divide that? How do you know you're doing well if you're always just doing it? And for me, it's like, I'm going to be doing this forever, but I still need to set like goals in terms of like milestones that I want to be hitting at certain points in my life, and and then they all change. But I guess it's more about just like, it's, if you think about like creativity as like a marathon kind of career, there's going to be points in it where you do need to kind of like sprint and go really hard, and then you kind of like burn out a little bit, and then you come back, and that's just kind of like the flow of the whole thing, I guess. Because it's like after Ultra, I knew I was going to like get really burnt out, and then I started working with my partner, who's like Clara Fable, who's a singer, and I just started doing like a whole bunch of stuff for her, because like for me mentally, like I'd already done all this work for me and gotten it out, and it was like really great to kind of just like, instead of just get burnt out like I usually do, just go immediately into like this other project where had like all these other ideas for it, because they were kind of like, it was a collaboration. And so it was really good to kind of like know what to expect in terms of like my energy level, and kind of just like continue through with it like that. But yeah, but it's like, you kind of need to set goals in terms of like what you want, and whether that be like exhibitions or making like a little publication. I think during COVID, I wanted to make a zine. Not that zines really sell or anything, but I just was like, I want to make, like 30, 50 new drawings or something. But then I think they ended up becoming Ultra instead of a zine, which is no, wait, no, it wasn't Ultra. I don't know what I did with them. I forgot about them.
The zine's coming up.
Oh, yeah, okay, I guess I got a new zine. I totally forgot. Oh, damn. Yeah.
But now you remember.
Now, thank you. Yeah.
It's really interesting to me, man. From what you just said, considering what you said before, which was, you're going to be doing this rest of your life, but then you want to set these goals, right? And it's really interesting because I don't feel you know, in general, people come across a lot of people that are like, I'm just going to be doing this for the rest of my life, and are cool with that, right? I think so many people are into this mode of thinking where they're like, well, I'm doing this for now until I get to that other thing that I want to do, or I'll try this out and see where it takes me. Let's see where this goes. Or they just have this set finite time period in their mind of how long they're going to do something for before there's some other thing, right? Whereas you've decided this is, or maybe understood or realized that for the person you are, this is what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life, right? And you seem very at ease with that. I'm not taking away from the other things you said, which is like there's times where you experience that imposter syndrome and it's hard, and you have these worries as all people do, and they're totally valid, when you feel them. But for the most part, you said, cool, this is what I'm going to do in the rest of my life. But then you've also said you want to hit these goals and set these goals. So I'm just interested to know how you come up with those goals and why you feel that they're important for you when you know you're going to be doing that the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of like, I've always known I'm like super lucky, super lucky that I always kind of like, once I realized that being an artist was a thing you could do, which was like 4th year of art school. And, even then I didn't even know that a job, like an illustrator, was a job description. Like I didn't know any of that stuff. I always thought it was like, I had no idea who made all that stuff. In my head, I was just like, you're going to be a graphic designer or an architect. Because that's what my parents were telling me. And so because of that, because of kind of like wasn't really 100% confident of doing art for a living completely and just having it be my life, I was doing a lot, like I was kind of dabbling in a lot of other stuff. So I went to ad school. I thought I was going to get into advertising. I did a bit of web design, did a bit of like graphic design, and I think, and even like, commercial illustration to an extent, some types of styles I was doing in that. I think by doing that stuff and kind of realizing I didn't want to do that stuff, that's what kind of really bolstered my view on like, oh, I'm going to be this forever, because I tried everything else and I don't like it. So that's why I can be so confident about what I'm going to be doing. And thing is, like within art, like, if you close those doors of like going like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be in advertising. Oh, I'm not going to do this or that, or I'm not going to end up like, it's really it's not like, I think people say yes to too much stuff. I think by closing those doors and by like unticking those boxes, you give yourself so much more freedom in terms of like what you've actually chosen to do, and you don't feel as guilty about doing it. And within the spectrum of art itself, there's so much you could be doing. Like there's painters, there's like performance artists, there's like, like I do like kind of, where I sit is really weird because it's kind of like digital, but then there's like street art stuff, and then there's like, I do a lot of stuff for like advertising still. And I think it seems normal for me because like the artists that I kind of came up with all do the same, because that's kind of like how we have to make a living. But yeah, I think it's just, within that, it's just kind of like, you're so busy just doing this one niche thing that it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's just kind of endless in terms of like, because even right now, it's just kind of like, I always fantasize about like, the hyperbolic time chamber in Dragon Ball Z. You guys, yeah. I think about that literally every day. I think about like, I'm like, I am so busy. I really just want to go off and do my own like art shit. But then it's kind of like, I'll say that to my friends, and they're just like, you are doing your own art shit. Like you do art for like, that's your life. You're not juggling this with like a 9 to 5 or anything like that. What are you talking about? So it's kind of like, I want to take a break from doing art to do more art stuff. I don't know. It sounds weird, but it's just, it's because there is just so much to do. I forgot your initial question.
That's right. I think you answered it.
Did I?
Yeah, and then you kept rolling, which is cool, man. That's what we do here. Yeah, I guess for what you were just saying then, you know, taking a break from art shit to do some more art shit.
Mm.
I think someone could hear that in a vacuum, right? And be like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
Mm.
But to give it context, right? What do you mean by that? Is that like do less commercial stuff so you can do more of your own stuff?
I think I just have a lot of different projects happening that all fit within the umbrella of like personal work. So once upon a time, there used to be a pretty, I guess when I started out, the commercial work and the personal work kind of looked the same. And then over time, as I had to pay like more rent and stuff, I was taking on more commercial work. And then the commercial work started looking a lot different to my personal work. And then it got to a point where it was all just commercial work because I was trying to just make money and be an adult and be responsible. And there wasn't a lot of personal work going on. And I think in about what year? Yeah, I think in like 2017, I had like a massive breakdown about it. I was just like, you're an artist who draws all day, who hates his job. Like, this is not cool. Like, may as well just work in an office or something, you know? And I made the decision to kind of like, not necessarily to like take on less commercial work, but to focus more on like personal stuff. And I think that really culminated when I I did like a massive mural job with Ambush Gallery, and then I took all that and I moved to Bangkok with it, and so I was doing a lot of I did like a whole show in Bangkok. That was the one I was talking about, the Inferno show. But then once that door opened and I was just been doing personal work within that world, there's like all these like series, and then there's like different exhibitions, and it's like it's weird. It's kind of like this weird, like you open one door and then there's like multiple doors inside that room, you know. Then you open one of those doors and it's multiple, and it's just like kind of infinite. It kind of just get, yeah. So it's kind of nuts, man. Like yeah, it does sound pretty crazy because it's like it's all I do, but it's just kind of like yeah, it does sound crazy from now that I think about it, but yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of weirdly how it is, and it's kind of like I used to feel like I was always running out of time, and then this, you know, if I didn't do this by a certain time, I'd feel terrible about it and like lose momentum. But I think COVID was a really interesting thing because that kind of just decimated all the timing that everyone ever had. Like any momentum that me or my other art friends had was pretty much stalled by that whole thing. And it was a good opportunity to kind of like take stock of what you've been doing and figure out whether you actually are moving in like a direction that you want to be moving, like with your work and things like that. But and so for me, it was just kind of like I stopped and I was kind of like, okay, cool, this is actually all really good. Like everything you're doing is really good. I actually want to do more stuff. But time is just like a really finite resource, you know, like I get like really anxious about that. But then it's kind of also, if I'm working on art like all the time, then I can't really be, there's nothing more I could do, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it sort of comes back down to, and I understand what you're talking about in terms of like, and how I sort of see it is this sort of balance between, you know, practicality and just simply doing what you feel you know, want to do or want to express at a particular moment, you know. And I sort of see, you know, some of your recent art, and I think you did a collaboration with KO Sports where you drew Kevin Durant in the art style, in your art style, and I just thought it would never occur to me for that collaboration or that style to, you know, emulate an NBA player, but it was completely you at the same time as something that was commercial, right? And I think that perhaps living in, you know, modernity and needing to consider things that are, you know, practical, as in like paying rent and living and making money and things like this, you sort of need to sort of strike that fine balance without losing yourself and your identity and whatever your style is and whatever it is that you feel like your work represents and expresses, right? And you know, I haven't been following your work for a very long time, but you know, that the work that I have seen, you know, the past couple of years, it all, you know, it all screams you. So I'd love to talk more about that and maybe how that has sort of evolved and what it sort of represents for you as an individual and what you're trying to express or the message you're trying to convey through your work.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think as you were saying that with the Kevin Durant thing, that's really funny because I was just like, yeah, that turned out pretty good, but I was also wouldn't have really thought to use myself for that project as well. But then it's kind of comes down to like the creative director or the art director, right? So it's just kind of like, I think with a lot of creativity is like combining two disparate things together to create something new out of it. So it's just kind of like, get this guy who doesn't who you wouldn't imagine drawing basketball players or anything like that at all, and get him to do it. Or like, it's like get it could be like, oh, okay, get this singer, this country singer to do like a cover of some like metal song or something like that. It's like combining all this stuff together to create new stuff. And I think yeah, like with commercial art and commercial illustration, like it really comes, the decisions are made by like the creative directors and the art directors. It's like kind of like we as the illustrators, like we do our style, but it's really up to them to even to hire us or to see where they could use us. And so it's kind of like comes down to them. And that Kevin Durant thing was cool because I like over time, and this really just comes down to like me having done this for like a really, really long time. I know what my stuff looks like, which sounds really simple, but it's not. It's like, I think early on when I was doing a lot of this commercial stuff, I was kind of thinking, okay, what do they expect from me? How do I fulfill this brief? Instead of being like, what's your take on doing this? And so I think when I was, the difference between me doing commercial work now and the difference between me doing commercial work when I first started is in the beginning, everything looked really different, I think. And now it's kind of like, if you get me to do something, you know how it's going to look, because my style, like I'm very aware of like what my style is now, and all the little things, like be it like, sometimes people are just like, it comes down to like a vibe. It comes down to like, there's objective things that make stuff look like mine, like the way I shade, the colors I use, for instance, like I always want it to look a bit like nostalgic anime kind of thing. Like I don't like doing cartoony stuff. I don't like doing like any crazy proportions too much, like cartoony. I don't do like giant heads and giant eyes and things like that. But it's like there are objective things that determine what someone's style looks like. But when you are in it, like when you're like it's kind of like that thing. It's like a fish has no word for the sea, right? When you're just making their work, sometimes you don't know what your style is, but other people can tell, like from outside can tell you. But yeah, style kind of comes as a byproduct of just like what you're interested in and just like how you draw. Like I enjoy drawing the way I draw. Which, yeah, again, that sounds like really simple, like a really simple thing to say, but it's like there are certain artists whose styles are like incredible, and I really love the way their work looks, but I would hate to draw the way they draw. It would just be like some artists who do like super, super detailed stuff. I would hate that. That's like a nightmare to me, So I like drawing the way I draw because it's kind of like, it's calming and it's meditative to me, and it's like it's fast enough. And then, yeah, over time, if you like look at it from the outside, then you kind of go like, okay, well, it actually involves like kind of really like feathered, straight, like lots of small feathered lines, or it's just kind of like the blacks are never always like super black. They always have like a bit of texture in them, or like even like my approach to colors is because I never learned color theory at art school. Not that I didn't go to the color theory class. I don't think they taught us that. I think I don't know why I just skipped it, but like I can't mix colors. I can't, like I did an oil painting class once, and it was the most confusing thing ever. Like I don't know how to mix colors, but that's why I only color like things digitally. But when I color digitally, you have all these crazy colors that don't exist like IRL. Like you can't, for instance, like do like, you can do fluoro stuff, but it's not in real life, but it's never fluoro as fluoro as it is on like you're seeing on a screen, because the screen's like backlit. So it's just like, yeah, like everything, yeah, all the styles that I kind of do just comes down to just like over time what I've enjoyed working with, if that makes sense. It's kind of, again, it's like with the career question, it's kind of like I know what I don't like, and that's how I know what I do like now, you know. But yeah, I think when I do commercial stuff, there's obviously in the past there's always been, it's weird, like people are always like, cool, really like your style, but don't do this, or make sure you don't do this, and da 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 da. And it's like I kind of felt like had to like hold back a lot during my career, and it's like that's why personal work became so important for me, because that's where I could actually just do my thing. And I feel like once you start taking that as a bit more of a priority and do your thing, then people actually see, oh, this is this person like really enjoying themselves making this stuff. They're just making it because they're trying to make money. And although the subject matter might be different between like my personal work and like commercial work, obviously the style, the objective style kind of stays the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So that's yeah, but that, you know, oh god, that took a long time to really kind of like be able to zoom out of my life and just be like, oh yeah, people hire you for this because they want it to look like this, not because they want, like, for instance, like a skull in it or a Grim Reaper in it. You know what I mean? Like you can apply the way you draw those things to other stuff. But yeah, it did take me a while to kind of like realize that.
Yeah, it's you said something really interesting. So, you know, well, first you mentioned when someone like briefs you on something, like, yeah, do what you do, just don't do that.
Yeah.
So I can relate to that because I've been on both sides of that coin. So like, you know, briefing things for creatives and then being like, yeah, I love how you do that, but you can't do this.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a guideline and shit like that. And so, you know, when you say it out loud, it's so stupid. Like I want you to do what you do, just don't do it how you do it, right? But you said this thing which I wrote down, which was like, it's what do they want versus how would I do it, right? And I imagine that's like a really tricky thing to navigate for someone like you, because I've had limited experience doing that as well. So like I've been briefed for design work that I've done in like my later years, right? For consultancy stuff, and it's a very hard battle. It's like, well, what do they want versus how would I do it? Because obviously you feel like there's a better way to do it, and then you got to balance up, well, they approached me to do it, so don't they want to know how I would do it? So is that like a constant battle for you, and how do you approach that?
Dude, it's huge. And I think what I had to learn over time was to not, like, when you're hired to do, essentially when you're hired by someone to do something, it's not necessarily like problem solving, but they want what they want out of it. And you can put the best of your ability into something, but at the end of the day, like, they still need what they need to get out of it. You know what I mean? So it's just like, and for me, I think it took a really long time to kind of like separate myself emotionally from that, because sometimes it just felt like someone paying you to slap yourself in the face. You know, it's like you're like, you submit like the best thing that you think is like the best of your ability to do, and they're like, no, we don't want this, we want it like this instead. And then it kind of, it's in a lot of ways, it's like, sometimes it's like really heartbreaking, but then it kind of made me think, like, why is this so heartbreaking? Like, why are you making such a big deal out of it? It's a job. And I think the reason why I was getting so frustrated a lot of the time is because I was spending so much time doing commercial stuff and not enough time doing my own stuff. If I was just doing my own stuff, I'd be like, whatever, like, you want me to draw this whack thing? Whatever, I'm going to go back and just draw my own shit after this, you know? So I think, yeah, it is a very hard aspect of doing like any commercial stuff. And I think, yeah, like, I don't know, like, especially talking to, like, it gets really addictive. I think the outrage over clients gets really addictive, and I've, you know, found myself in that position a lot of times where I'm just like, you know, you sit around with some friends and just bitch about it, blah, blah, blah. But then after a while, you kind of just like, we're choosing to do this. No one's putting a gun to our head, you know. It's like, we choose to do this. It's frustrating, yeah, but it it's just a job, and sometimes it's like, I don't think it was up until I started hearing like younger designers and stuff complaining about work, where I'm just kind of like, dude, that's just part of the job. It's like, they're like, can you believe this client asked for this change the night before it was due? I'm like, yeah, 100% I can believe it. It's called working in this industry, like harden up. And so yeah, I guess it's just like, yeah, it is hard. I think a lot of it as well is communication. So it's just like, I always make a point of, if I do submit something to someone and I know it's going to be, might seem a bit scary or a bit whack, explain why I've made the decisions I've made. And then like, yeah, because it's, although it is over email and it's kind of like this kind of turn-based thing, it is a process. It's kind of like a conversation. And yeah, I think the older I get, the more I'm kind of like, look, they want what they want out of it. Just do it, do you for them. This isn't going to be the last thing you ever make. Go, if it bothers you that much, then go make your own version of it. And then, by the time you do that, you're kind of just like, well, no, it didn't really bother me that much at all, because I'm definitely not making my own version of this, because I got other stuff to do and other stuff to worry about. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was really hard. That's probably, I think, feedback and things like that, that's probably like the hardest part of doing it and this kind of stuff, because thousands of little decisions that you're making in the background while you're creating something, and you're trying to create like the best thing, like you're not half-assing it at all. And then for someone to come back and be like, no, this is shit, this is this. Yeah, it's just, it's like a kick in the guts. But I think it's also, if you're getting paid enough, then you're fine with it. I think it's funny because it's like, I kind of do this thing where I look back on like the kind of jobs and projects I've been working on, and like what made me feel good and what made me feel bad. And yeah, if I've ever worked a job with like a million changes, and like, how come that I didn't feel bad over that one? It's like, because you're getting paid loads, it was like, it was fine. It's only when it's like you're getting paid like nothing, and someone's like completely taking the piss in terms of changes and not respecting you at all, is when you start getting really like annoyed with it, or when it starts getting really upsetting. That's what I found for me anyway.
Yeah. And this raises an interesting question. I think, just, irrespective, like if you think about all of these considerations, about making, just practicalities of making money and things like this, right? Is there for yourself like ever like almost like a threshold that you will, or a boundary that you will not cross in terms of how much a piece of work will or will not represent who you are, or whether you want it to be, associated with your name? Because I guess for myself, I think about this question, right? And, I'm writing a book at the moment, and I've explored a couple of avenues for publishing. And I know that, if I go down the route of a publishing house, that they're going to make decisions based on, whether it's commercially viable. And that will likely mean that they're going to make large edits to, the content of my work, to the point where it may lose its, essence, and it's the soul of what I'm trying to, convey through this piece of work. So it's essentially for me personally, that has taken that option off the table for me. It has to be self-publishing, because I need to have essentially creative, license to do exactly what I want and say what I want to say. I'd love to get your thoughts on it from your perspective.
That is, yeah, that's a really big one, dude. That's because essentially at the end of the day, the reason why you're doing any kind of personal thing, like, writing a book is like a big deal. Like, right, that's like the amount of like just daily routine that like, and forcing yourself to just like get the words out, and like, I'd imagine that's so hard, and there's so many like small moments that are involved in creating that. And if you create something to fill up an entire book, and then you at the end they're just making these drastic edits to it or anything like that, that's a big deal, because it's like, it's your baby. and it's a very intimate process. And I think when you do create any kind of personal work like that, yeah, on the one hand, sometimes you are too close to it and you might need a fresh set of eyes, but sometimes you're like, hey, this is exactly what I want it to be like. And if you butt heads with someone in that regard, that's going to be really tough, because then it's kind of like, do you then submit something, then do you then release something that you're not 100% happy with because you're collaborating with this other institution or like publisher or whatever? I think, yeah, that's a really tough one. Like, I know whenever I've done like personal work, I've been really lucky that like I'm not that I'm like a diva or a drama queen or anything. Like, I just know what I want. So for instance, it's like whenever when I did the show in LA, like I know I wanted the walls all painted. That was a big of a nightmare for the gallery, but I said that from the beginning that I wanted to do that. And then, during the course of like setting up the show, there were conversations about like, do we really need to do that? It's going to be a lot of work. Can't we just do it? And I was just kind of really just stuck to my guns about it. And again, with like Ultra, I wanted to paint like the floor and stuff like that. And then like, towards the end, it was like, do we really need, like they were like, we're running out of time. Do we really need to do that? And I'm just like, well, in my mind, it's only perfect if it looks a certain way. It looks like this. Like I can cut corners where I can cut corners, but there's still certain elements that need to go in there, and it needs to be and they can just be like really small as well. But yeah, for me, I think it's like, if it's personal work, I don't ever let anything really compromise it, because that's mine. And I feel like I work too hard to let any like someone else's apathy affect my creativity, so but in terms of commercial stuff, I often think about this, because it's like someone said something once, like I was talking to a friend, and it was like they were like, oh, can you believe it, this guy's going to Chris Brown's house to paint a mural. And I'm like, so what? He's going to Chris Brown's house to paint a mural. It's like, that's so bad. And I'm just like, that is bad. Like, everyone hates Chris Brown, but it's just kind of like, just painting a mural at Chris Brown's house. And they're like, would you paint a mural at Chris Brown's house? And I'm like, I don't know if I paint a mural at Chris Brown's house. It would look really bad if I painted a mural at Chris Brown's house. But I mean, I don't know. Like, thing is like, and so people are just like, but he's like an abuser and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, like it's true. It would be like some kind of Faustian bargain, right? Like, Chris Brown pays you heaps of money, you in with all these like hip hop guys, but then the internet hates you. And I'm just kind of like, damn, like, I don't know what, I guess it's kind of comes down to like, what's worth more. So I don't know if I'll ever paint a mural at Chris Brown's house. No one's ever asked me. He never asked me. But a thing that came up recently with that was the NFT thing, where you see all these memes. It's like that. It's like someone, I saw one that was like, James Jean sold his first NFT for like something crazy. I can't tell you the number. It's like 200, maybe 240,000, probably more. I can't remember what it was, but there was a meme that was just like, the amount of electricity that it took James Jean to sell that NFT would have powered a small European village for a decade or something like that. And in my head, I'm just like, artists are now becoming this, on like on Captain Planet, the bad guys, and they're all just like these crazy, just bad for the people who just like pollute the environment for their own gain, but they just all look crazy. I started just thinking about artists as that now, like with NFT, like people were just looking at me being like, yeah, you made all this money on NFT, but you destroyed a small European town just to sell a GIF. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. And I'll do it again. I mean, look, I'm laughing about it, but it's bad. Like it is really bad. But I don't think we're destroying small European towns every time we're selling an animated GIF. We are using a lot of energy very pointlessly for the algorithms, for the mining and everything. But yeah, I think even with the NFT thing, it's just kind of like, cool. What's your stance on the environment? And like me, as like, I'm like a pretty minimalist guy. I don't like creating physical artwork because I don't like creating mass. But then I'm just kind of like, well, you create on a computer and that uses electricity, and that's still bad for the environment. So it's just kind of like, in terms of working on something that is like a line that you don't want to cross, it kind of just comes down to your values, you know? And I think, yeah, like, would I ever, for instance, what was that? Oh, there was like a documentary about some woman who was working for the Trump administration, and she started off as a massive lefty, but then the Republican Party like paid way better, so she just worked for them. And then in the end, she regretted it. But it always, yeah, it comes down to those kinds of questions. And I guess you don't really know if you're going to paint a mural at Chris Brown's house until Chris Brown asked you, you know? So I don't know.
It's very true. You would not know.
Good.
But it's like, I think about this sort of stuff as well. It's like how everything has to impact everything, right?
Mm.
Look, if you go to the nth degree of anything, it will do that, right? You can relate anything to anything if you go far enough down that rabbit hole. But sometimes I feel like the essence of something gets really diluted by that. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, there's also this thing happening in the world right now, and I'm not trying to like make a statement or work out any answer to this, but it's like, by doing something, you're sacrificing something else. And it feels to me like there's this real kind of like knee-jerk reaction from people to be like, oh, you've done this NFT and you made so much money and you wasted all this energy. But it's like, what about just the NFT and the guy that worked to get to that point and did it? And someone's going to really enjoy that, and who knows what's going to happen with that, and if that inspires someone. Like, you can just go either way with it. But I feel like right now there's a lot of this behavior, I would call it, where people like there's something that people will take note of, and then they're like, oh, but this, it fucks on it this way. Like, but why, man? Like, why? Just,
I think that we're also in a time now, unfortunately, where people are, it's like this kind of weird thing. It's not confirmation bias, it's called something else. It's like, if you wake up in the morning and you just look out for things to piss you off, and okay, say for instance, if you're the kind of person who's going to be like, my life sucks, the world's against me, all you're going to look for is things, okay, it is confirmation bias. All you're going to look for is things that are going to prove you right in that regard. All you're going to look for is things that are, you're like, oh, this is bad, the bus was late, my sandwich was cold, my life sucks, blah, 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 blah. You're only going to look at that. And I think a lot of the time with internet culture now, people, and I think it's gotten a lot better. I think the pendulum is kind of swinging back from where it was maybe about 2 years ago. But people for a while were just looking at things for holes in it and looking to, not necessarily to get offended or outraged, but just be like, it made them, it was like, it became a game almost, to be able to find something completely random, like an artist posting something like a certain type of artwork, and just be like, this is problematic because of this is and like poke holes in it. And with the NFT thing, that was really interesting, because I think when I first got into it, my friend messaged me and he's like, get ready for the messages and the comments. I'm like, what do you mean, about what? And then I started getting them. I was being like, you know, killed a dolphin for this, and da 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 da. And I'm like, what the hell? And they were right. I did kill a dolphin for it, but I'll do it again. But it is this weird thing where it's just kind of like, yeah, people will find holes in everything and not see kind of the bigger picture. Or, you know, it's this weird thing as well, I think, because the kind of the work I make sometimes offends people. Not that it's like that crazy, but there are people who are just like, oh, you know, that like, I don't like the way you depict people and stuff like that. And it's just like, well, I'm not really making work for people. I'm not a corporation. I'm not a ad agency. I'm an artist. I'm like making work for me and the people who see my work and get it. I'm not making my work for the people who don't get it. So if you want to poke holes in my work, I'm not going to change it on your behalf unless you've given me an insight that I've kind of seen it and gone, oh, okay, look, that might actually be, problematic to like my values and stuff. And then I might change it. And my work has kind of changed over time to be not just like purely like superficially just like babes for the hell of it. And yeah, but there is a thing on the internet now where I think it becomes a game where people will just go try to find a hole in something or be outraged by something, and so they can be on like some kind of moral high horse. But that's just, I think that's just a result of having so many people's voices being able to be heard at once all the time now. Because back in the day, and I was alive before the internet, you didn't have to hear about shit. It's like if people didn't like something, you didn't have to hear about it. If people didn't like you, they'd tell you to your face in the like
if they
did, and that was just like, a couple of people in high school. But it's just like now it's just kind of like if anyone has the slightest problem, like it's like I'll see like comments on like my partner's TikTok, and I'm just like, because I'm not on TikTok, and I'm just like, who are these people? And why are they coming at people for like the most random shit? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, like to the thing you said about like someone said, oh, you killed a dolphin to make this, right? It's kind of like, well, you didn't actually kill a dolphin. You know what I mean? So like, just so people are clear on that one. And if you don't know what NFTs are and shit like that for whoever's listening, but it's like, you didn't actually kill a dolphin, right? Like it's, you use an amount of power that could have done this or could have done that. And it's all this like hypothesizing around things that could be, that actually aren't. And that's my point is like, I feel like people are taking something that someone's doing and then just misconstruing it in this whole bunch of ways, right? And why I'm curious, and I bring that up in this conversation is because, I was wondering, does that affect your work and what you do, especially when what you do is so subjective, right? But I think you've answered it by saying you'd do it again, right? But that's what I was interested in and wanting to find out from you, which you've answered, because it's hard, man. Like we all do things here which are in the public eye, and we have these moments. Well, I have these moments where you sort of second guess yourself before putting something out there because you have a feeling it might be received in a shitty way or a way that you don't want it to. Me personally, now I just still put it out. I'm like, well, it's what I want to do, so I'm going to do that as long as it's not hurting someone else, like directly, maliciously in my intent, right? But if I'm not, like if it's just I'm putting it out because it's something I want to put out and you construe it a different way, it's really on you. And yeah, like I don't let it affect my output, right? And which is why I'm curious for you, like in what you do, right? Like if you were going to draw something that was going to offend someone, right? Like would you be steered away from drawing it or putting it out?
Well, I think the whole premise of this, like, and topic of this conversation is the fact that anyone can find anything to find offensive, and then find a whole bunch of people online to quickly bandwidth and form some sort of hateful mob, because it's so easy that you just swipe a couple of screens up and down. And by the way, but people who are fucking commenting and shit like that, you're using electricity as well. So you may not be fucking killing a dolphin, you might be killing a rat or something, but it's still a fucking life, So it's the same sort of shit. They might be saying that with one hand, and then I don't know, eating a packet of chips, which then they throw the non-compostable packaging out, and it attributes to global landfill and shit like that, right?
I saw a really funny, it was like a tweet. Okay, I'm gonna paraphrase it because I don't remember it exactly, but it's like people complaining about M&Ts, but then in the meantime ordering like one single carrot for some home delivery, like pre-cooked meal thing in a plastic wrap, and like the cost of like the delivery driver packing the carrot and all that stuff, and it's like the way I see it with a lot of this stuff, and it's not just the NFT thing, but it's just like in terms of doing anything that you kind of just want to do. I feel like because I do commercial illustration and because I already have someone telling me what to do with that, whenever I do personal stuff, I'm just like, don't don't talk to me about don't tell me what I can and can't do when it comes to personal stuff, because the other half of my career is literally just being told what to do all the time, which I'm fine with, but that's why there's two. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you, yeah. And again, it's this thing of just, if you're just living for other people, if you make work for other people, it's not good, and they don't like it, and you don't even like it, then there was no real point to it. You know, like you got to at least do something there. It's like, if you make something that you really like, or if you're like really behind it and someone doesn't like it, that's fine, because at least you like it. But you know, if you make something for someone else and they don't like it and you don't like it, then that was just like a waste of everyone's, well, mostly your time, you know. Yeah, I guess that's where I see a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I think, you know, there's objective reality to the issues with NFT, but then there is also, but so that shouldn't be too tied in with like the arguments about like whether work is like certain artworks and stuff like problematic or whatever. But yeah, it kind of just comes down to this thing of just like people hold artists for some reason to a different kind of like moral standard or a high ground. And I don't know if people have met artists, but they're not like nice people. Not that absolves us of any responsibility or anything like that, but it's just like, yeah, I feel like people think that art is meant to serve a certain function, but art isn't meant to serve a certain function. Art exists and people create it. And if you can extract a meaning from it, or like feel less alone from it because it resonates with you, then that's great. But art wasn't, you know, it's just, one time I was like one of my friends came under fire because someone was like, oh, you draw women, you only draw skinny chicks. And she's like, well, I draw myself and I'm a skinny chick. Like, what's the problem there? You know, and people would be like, your work doesn't represent everyone, you're the devil, da 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 da. And she was kind of like, I don't know if she was upset by it or anything, but I just remember seeing that whole thing unfold and just being like, this is completely ridiculous. You know, like, we don't have to, if we're doing our personal work, we don't have to, like, we're not doing it like for a brief for anyone, unless we are doing it as a brief for someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you do it for you, not for how someone else is going to feel about it.
Yeah, it's some invisible audience or some random stranger, because that's like the panopticon, you know, like the panopticon is the that fictional prison. I don't think it's fictional anymore. I think people have actually built it, where you build the guard tower in the middle and then you build the prison around the guard tower. That way all the prisoners never know when the guards are actually looking at them, and so they're always on their best behavior because they're constantly in fear of like being like seen to do something bad. And I think if you live that way as a creative, then it's incredibly stifling and you're not really going to be making anything decent. If you're just constantly worried about like what people are going to say, what might possibly say or be offended about with your work, I don't think that the work you make is going to be particularly interesting, because you can make abstract work even, which has no subject matter, which isn't going to really offend anyone, and people are still going to hate it. You know, like, because I got friends who make abstract work and people still find something wrong with it. And I'm like, that's abstract art. That's literally like, that's like a crooked line against a wall and you're mad about it. So, yeah, people like the human capacity for outrage is just boundless, I think.
I think you captured it nicely with the word fear, mate. I mean, like I said right at the top of the show, to my sense of it, true artists, like, you know, who are pure in heart and create from a place of purity, they are the courageous people who are necessary in society to show those people who are afraid of stepping outside of these, you know, very rigidly drawn straight lines, that there is a world outside of what we've been told, you know. And it takes a lot of courage to do that on a, you know, on a day-to-day basis, a moment-to-moment basis, to express oneself, you know, unreservedly, regardless of what people will say. And like I said, I think the people who the haters are really just those who are afraid to do that themselves in some way. So,
well, it kind of reminds me of like, do you remember? It's like whenever you hear about, for instance, like, it's like a podcast I was listening to recently, but it was just like some like super hyper conservative like Christian groups, but then you find out that like, you know, they all do like fucked up shit on the side. You know what I mean? It's just like there is the idealism that people aren't as messed up as they are, and therefore should make work that looks a certain way or it fits a certain kind of like vanilla, like ticks every box kind of thing. But the reason why certain works of art, like be it literature, music, or visual art, or like whatever, are resonate with people is when they do touch on those parts of ourselves that are outside of what we see our ideal as, because I think we are a lot more fucked up than we tend to acknowledge or want to believe that we are. You know, and I think if you can name the demon, you can have control over it. If you know that you're like messed up, if you know that you have these issues, then you're more of a well-rounded person because you're dealing with it and you acknowledge it, and you know, you see it reflected in like art. And if you don't, if you just ignore it, then it's gonna just creep up on you, man. And I think, like I think people with the whole moral high ground thing, I think people don't ask themselves like certain hypothetical. I don't know. I've been watching like a lot of Saw lately. And like the Jigsaw killer, and he's like the worst. He's the most annoying guy. He's like the Riddler on steroids. But it's just kind of like there was a period of time where, you know, I was getting into these kinds of conversations with people, and I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm gonna put my friend in that situation. I'm gonna put them in a situation where they're gonna have to choose something, and then we'll see who's got the moral high ground and stuff. I never did because I didn't have the time. And then I got put onto the Saw movies, and I was like, I don't want to end up like Jigsaw. But yeah, like people, unless you've like been put into that situation or have asked yourself those questions, or like, you know, you don't know how you're going to react or how you think to certain things.
And you know what, like everyone is needs like an outlet, you know, to express themselves some way, somehow. And if it's like, you know, not something that is visited and nurtured and, you know, looked at on a regular-ish basis, then it's going to come out in ways that, you know, are probably quite destructive to themselves or to other people. So
absolutely, man.
Yeah, so might be a nice place to wrap up the conversation. I'm sure we could keep going on with that, but
wrap it up in a dark way.
Yeah, you know, hey, it's real, and that's what we like, you know. It's real. So cool. You know, I love for people to, you know, really, you know, think about that sort of stuff and just have a look at before judging people and speaking from a place of fear, really just reflecting upon themselves and what it is that they may need to, you know, what questions they need to potentially find the answers for themselves, you know. Worry about yourself before you worry about others is what I say. But yeah, James, thank you so much for your time, mate. It was a pleasure. It was an honor. I love chatting with you. And, you know, like I said, I could go on for hours, but yeah, I'd love for you to, you know, share with the audience where they can find you, mate.
Yeah, thanks, man. This has been great. Unexpected deep dive conversations today. So I think that, okay, look, for probably the best place to find me is on Instagram. That's all I use now. I'm trying to minimize my social media, which is bad as an artist, because you meant to just kind of like spread your tendrils everywhere. But I only really have the attention span to use Instagram now. So that's James Jirat, JamesJirat on Instagram, and that's pretty much where I do all my stuff. I don't post as much as I should, because I'm off freaking out over some other shit. But yeah, that's it. Oh, and then my website, it's jirat.jp, so JRAT.jp, which I haven't updated in a long time. But I think those are the two main things. Don't try to add me on Facebook. I never check it. I have a Twitter, James Patradoon, but I don't really use that either.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, man. Well,
Yeah.
we'll definitely add all those links to the show notes so people can find you easier.
Oh, and on my foundation as well. Foundation.app, app/Jirat, Jirat. That's where all my NFT stuff is.
Okay, cool. We'll add
But
that
yeah,
too, man.
I think
Awesome.
that's it.
Cool.
Thanks so much, guys. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you. Shaun, where can people find you, bro?
Yeah, easiest place to find me is on Instagram too. So just Shaun_Coop, SHAUN_COOP. And people can also find out more about some of the work we're doing, Les, at true-north.co. Just head over to that website. And how about you, bro? Where can they find you?
Yep, they can find me on my website, findingspace.co, as well as Instagram and Facebook at findingspace.co.
Awesome. James, just want to thank you again as well, myself, for joining us today. It's been, a very unexpected conversation down some holes that, but that's the beauty of these conversations. That's what we love doing here and having the space to be able to do. And yeah, man, just keep doing you.
Thanks,
Sounds like it's
Shaun.
working
Thanks,
out
Leslie.
great.
I appreciate it, man. It's been great.
Until next time, guys.
See you guys.